everyone to another conversation. And I have with me this morning Kenneth Feinberg, who is or was the Special Master for the September the 11th Victims Compensation Fund. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you very much. An honor to be participating.
Well, I mean, I think the honor is all ours. I mean, I've watched the movie Worth on Netflix. For those that haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. And I've read your book. I'm just so grateful that people like you took on tasks like that. What an enormous emotional cost using your professional skills. So thank you.
Well, thank you. You're right to focus on the most difficult part of all of these assignments, like 9/11, namely the emotional overhang of trying to distribute compensation to people who have suffered such grief, innocent victims. The emotional overhang is the most difficult part of the entire venture.
Oh, yeah, I can see that. So I want to talk about grief and loss a little later, but let's just go into how the fund came into being, because there were some flaws and you inherited a very big task with a statute that had some limitations. How did it all come about? It was rushed through very quickly, correct?
Yes, 13 days after the attacks, Congress passed a very unique special law. And the law simply said that anybody who suffered physical injury as a result of the 9/11 attacks, or any family who lost a family member in the airplanes or the World Trade Center or the Pentagon, could voluntarily, at their own option, enter a very generous fund created by Congress and funded entirely by public taxpayer money. Not insurance, not World Trade Center or airline money. This was a public compensation program, voluntarily permitted. And over the 33 months of the program, 97% of all eligible family members who lost a loved one on 9/11 voluntarily entered the program. And only 3%, 94 people, opted to litigate rather than exercise their right to come into the fund. The fund was very much a success, and we expended $7.1 billion of taxpayer money to 5,300 eligible victims.
It's quite incredible. And you basically, from what I've read, had the role of deciding who got what. It was pretty much the buck stopped with you. You did have some oversight from the Attorney General, but basically it was you.
That's right. Hardly a conventional way in America to do things. I mean, here you delegated Congress to one person, full authority to decide eligibility, to decide the amount of the awards, no appeals, no access to the courts, a congressional effort to promote efficiency and get this behind us as a horrible American tragedy.
So you worked without fee, I gather, but your law officers supported the infrastructure that was required apart from PwC. What was behind that? I mean, that was a huge thing for someone to generously give of their time to such a degree that took such an emotional toll.
Two reasons. One, patriotism. I was very reluctant to be receiving compensation when all of these victims lost loved ones, and it was such a national, unprecedented tragedy. To get paid, I didn't think that was appropriate. Also, I must say, strategically and practically, if I received compensation for doing this, I feared that there would be victims who would scream, "Feinberg is making money, it's blood money. My daughter is dead and Feinberg is getting." paid for this? I mean, I just thought that would be a terrible obstacle to success if I was viewed as being compensated. No.
You did something like 900 family meetings, I read, and I worked it out. I mean, my goodness, that is just massive. How did you schedule that apart from all the other responsibilities and make it work?
We concluded that giving individual claimants, family members, the right to be heard privately in a closed office with the person responsible for the program was essential. Now, half the people that had claims never wanted to see me. They grieved in private. The other half saw me or my designee. I ran out of time. I couldn't see every single person, but I conducted 900 some odd individual hearings. And it was the most difficult, wrenching, debilitating aspect of the entire program, the one-on-one meetings with victims, innocent victims in grief. That was debilitating.
Yeah, and the thing from our own work is grief and loss, validating people's feelings. You can't, until that happens, people can't get past where they need to go and make decisions. Were you and your team given any support on grief and loss before this suddenly erupted? Because you had some experience in Agent Orange, so you had an understanding about that, but people had dealt with that. It wasn't so raw.
That Agent Orange case, where we compensated soldiers from Australia during the Australian study, the program. Agent Orange was the first mass tragedy that I designed and administered a compensation program. Then from Agent Orange around 1985, for the next 15 years, air crashes, airplane accidents, floods, asbestos injuries and deaths caused by exposure to asbestos fiber, other mass tragedies. So that in 9/11, my former boss, Senator Kennedy, and President Bush and Attorney General John Ashcroft got together, and they figured out that a program like this, so unique in American history, should really be designed and administered by somebody with some experience in dealing with grieving victims. And it became a very partisan program, a political program, and it worked quite well.
So the uniqueness about your skill set, apart from being, I guess, let's say, a personal injury specialization, is the fact that you had policy experience as well. You worked in a Senator Kennedy's office, so you understood pleasing the masters, so to speak, of government, but you needed to get on with the task at hand. Would that be correct?
No, that would be correct, but I vastly underestimated, despite my wide experience, I vastly underestimated the emotional trauma of dealing with individual victims or their families so soon after the attacks. As you pointed out at the outset, this program was up and running within like 60 days after the attacks. People would say to me, Mr. Feinberg, you're going to provide me, $3 million for the death of my daughter. They haven't even found her body yet. And you're here knocking on my door, offering me money? How dare you? And that emotional part of this entire program, I learned the hard way that sometimes empathy and sensitivity is more important than legal niceties about efficiency and certainty and cost. Sometimes instead of my law degree, I thought maybe I ought to have a divinity degree.
I read that.
or a degree in psychiatry. You're dealing with very emotional, vulnerable people.
So do you think, I mean, there's a big learning there for other lawyers, and I don't know whether you've actually realised that, because legalese, when people are in trauma and great tragedy, can often be really offensive, as you pointed out. It's like it's very practical, and people do need validation and empathy. Have you had the opportunity to share that with other law students and help them to understand sometimes you've got to put that to a side and be a human being first?
Oh, since I ended the program in 2005, I've spent the last 15, 16 years explaining to lawyers and others how important it is in tragedies like 9/11 to prioritize empathy and emotional understanding, much more difficult than calculating the value of a claim. Calculating the value of a claim is not science. Judges and juries do it every day in Australia, in the United States, in Great Britain. It is not rocket science, but dealing emotionally with victims who are angry, frustrated, disappointed, worried about their future, that's the heart and soul of measuring success of a program like 9/11.
How did you deal with some of the extra tragedies? You talk about a lady who had terminal cancer and she needed the money quickly to look after her children. Did the statute allow for that, or did you have to bring it forward?
That was part of our regulations. The statute didn't allow it, but it didn't prohibit it. The statute created by Congress didn't require any hearings with individuals. We decided that individual voluntary hearings for those who wanted to see me would be essential, and it proved to be very essential.
How did you keep your team buoyant? Because if you were feeling the burden of the emotional onslaught, how were they dealing with it? I mean, you know, you had to keep people emotionally well.
You tried. Some staff members had to bow out. They couldn't take the stress and the emotional angst of dealing with this. But I had a professional staff. I had accountants and lawyers that I had worked with before. The Department of Justice provided me assistance, Office of Management Budget. We went about our job in a professional, objective manner, but I still suffer the stress of remembering some of those horrible situations that we confronted.
I'm sure you do. I mean, PTSD and all of those things in your profession are very evident. So I hope you're looking after your health these days, because it's a big deal.
Oh, no, it is. And, when the President of the United States asks you to do something, take on something like this, you can't say, I'm too busy or it's too stressful. I mean, we all felt an obligation to our country and to one community, the United States, to do the job and do it right.
So you're not an advocate, it seems, for another fund, compensation fund like 9/11, and you talk about, the Oklahoma bombings and things that what about me was really the attitude. Do you foresee something like that? I mean, let's, God forbid, that we have another terrorist attack like that. But do you think your views will be taken on board? Because you learnt a lot.
Yes, there won't be another. In the United States and Australia, everywhere, bad things happen to good people every day.
Absolutely.
There's no 9/11 fund. The reason I'm confident in predicting not another fund. Hurricane Katrina here in the United States, 2005. Over 1,000 people died in that flood in New Orleans and Louisiana. There was no 9/11 fund. You should have read some of the letters I received during the 9/11 fund. Dear Mr. Feinberg, my son died in Oklahoma City. The bombing of the Albert Murrah building by a domestic terrorist. Where's my money? Dear Mr. Feinberg, I don't get it. My daughter died in the basement of the World Trade Center in the original 1993 attacks committed by the very same type of people. Why aren't I eligible? And it wasn't just terrorism. Dear Mr. Feinberg, last year, my wife saved 3 little girls from drowning in the Mississippi River, and then she drowned a heroine. Where's my check? No. Carving out a very generous compensation program with public money just for these victims. Everybody else, you hire your lawyer, I'll hire my lawyer, judge and jury. That's the American legal system. This one-off 9/11 fund, I think, is a precedent for nothing. You'll never see it again, nor should you. And I think the program worked, but let's not do it again.
So I want to ask you a couple of personal questions. I mean, first of all, the family support that you required for something like this, and I read that you were an very early riser, but it took the other end of the day as well. So did they rally around you? Because it would have been extraordinary pressure on your home life as well.
Oh, it did. And my wife and my children were extremely supportive, loving, understanding, dad, and whatever. My wife was terrific. The American people were terrific. I would have thought this program would be very divisive and polarizing in America. It turned out that it was apolitical. There were no red states, blue states, liberals, conservatives, Democrats, Republicans. No. One community rallied to help innocent victims. I doubt very much in America today that you could get that type of bipartisan, apolitical support. I don't think you could have a 9/11 fund today in America, but only 20 years or so ago, it worked, thanks to the American people.
And the unusual thing I found about your book, and it's not portrayed in the movie, is you talk about faith and hope and being human. That's unusual for a lawyer to actually bring that into the conversation. But it was very obvious to you, was it not, that some people were leaned in, other people rejected, people were struggling to find meaning and purpose.
Oh, I think that's right. You've read my book. I can see very, very carefully. There were some people who came to me angry. How could God allow this to happen? I'll never step foot in a church again. And then there were people that came to me, Mr. Feinberg, my husband is in a better place. It renews my faith in God and in religion. What I found so astounding was the incredible diversity of how individuals react to instant tragedy. Some hold on to religion, some declare religion to be a farce, and there are as many approaches as there are diversity in human nature. You may think you know how someone will react, but when you meet with them, it can be altogether different.
So I guess I want to ask about the book and the movie. I mean, I am so glad that you wrote that book and told that story, because often, great stories are not told. People don't take the time. Did it come to you, or did a publisher approach you, and how did the movie come about?
I decided to write the book because I wanted first, it was cathartic. I wanted to put down on the printed page what we all went through in designing and administering the program. I also wrote it as a memoir. I knew that this fund was unique in American history, and I wanted the American people and the world really to understand the genesis of the fund, why a fund, and how it worked. I never thought that the book would become a movie. In fact, I sold the book rights to a movie producer in, I think, 2007.
Wow,
2007.
that's a long time ago.
They did not even have a movie script prepared until 2017, 10 years later. They didn't start filming until 2018. And I was dubious and skeptical that a movie could accurately convey what we went through. But the screenwriter, Max Borenstein, wrote a very good script. Michael Keaton and Amy Ryan and Stanley Tucci, they played wonderful roles. And although the movie takes a fair amount of dramatic license, as it must, in putting a book to the screen, overall, I think the movie does a pretty good job of conveying what we went through.
I actually agree, having read the book and watched the movie. I thought the dramatic license, I mean, yes, that's popular culture in movies, but I was waiting for those parts in your book. And yeah, I think it's reasonable.
Now, my children, of course, are harsh critics. Dad, Michael Keaton is wonderful in the movie. But Dad, he really should stick to Batman or Beetlejuice, because he didn't accurately convey you. But I think overall, Michael Keaton did a splendid job.
Yeah. So I ask everyone two questions, and I'm sure you've sort of answered them, but I'm sure you'll give us an insight. And those two questions are, how do you now practice self-care? And that will be fascinating, given what you've actually been through as a human being. And what does spirituality mean to you? And I know you talk about a wonderful quote from Dr. Zhivago in your book.
Well, the second question, spirituality. I was sort of a secular Jew before 9/11. I still think I'm more secular than religious, but I must say, you learn the hard way that spirituality and some religious grounding is important. It is. And I am amazed at how religion plays a role in so many people's lives. And I think I'm probably more religious having gone through this. But it's difficult.
Yeah, yeah. The interesting thing just on spirituality, what you did, and you probably weren't even aware of it, although you were talking about closure and validation, is you allowed people to have a ritual. And rituals are so important for closure. By coming to you and having a hearing and an opportunity to talk, that gave people comfort.
Oh, I think that's right. And people didn't come see me to talk about money. I would have thought, well, they want more money. That's not why they came. They came to see me either to vent about life's unfairness. Mr. Feinberg, I lost my wife. She was an angel, and now she's gone. And the government was asleep at the switch. And what a horrible negligence on the part of the United States. Or, nope, they come to see me to validate the memory of a lost loved one. Mr. Feinberg, I lost my husband. We were married for 25 years. He was my rock. And I want to show you a video of our wedding 25 years ago. I want you to see what a wonderful man he was. Look at that. And it's just heart-wrenching. Not about.
So last question, if you were to give other lawyers, because we have an audience of nearly 26,000, many of those are legal people, advice that operate in this area of the law, maybe probably personal injury, workers' compensation, all of those, what would it be from what you've learned?
I've learned that there are many, many great lawyers in the United States. And I learned from Agent Orange in the 1980s, there are fabulous lawyers in Australia. Competence, legal skill, I'm not sure it's even half of it. Do you have the degree of empathy? Can you put yourself in the other person's shoes? Can you exercise wise judgment so that it's not adversarial? It's more trying to get to a consensus, to yes, on how to resolve a dispute. how to deal with an adversary. The human part of lawyering, that's what I learned most from the 9/11 Fund.
Thanks for joining us, Ken.
Thank you very much. And I'm honored to have been invited, and I hope I'll be able to return. I've been to Canberra, and I hope I'll be able to return someday. And thank you very much for this opportunity.